Welcome everyone. So welcome to Jordan B Peterson community. You can find us at jordanbpeterson.community. So what we do is during the weekdays we uh, watch his lectures on the uh, usually the Bible series and Maps of Meaning series. But we are mostly done with Maps of Meaning, and in Bible we are at the last lecture, and we also have a book reading group which you can find in the description. We read one of the books recommended by him, and then we discuss it during the Saturday, and then on Sunday we record this podcast. So today, this podcast is about the second part of his book. So we already had a discussion on his book last week, but we couldn't complete it. So this week we'll be doing that.
So today, I guess we'll be mainly focusing on kind of like we went through and tried to find what aspects of these rules can be implementable into our day-to-day life. And so we came up with a set of like action plans for each, based upon each of his different rules. And some of his rules are kind of like more straightforward, that are kind of an action plan within themselves. And for those, for some of them, we tried to kind of break down what it is that is actually being said here, like what besides just kind of the basic literal interpretation of the rule. So I guess we'll go through pretty quickly, since I'm not sure. I should have at least an hour, so should be good here. All right. Yeah. Guess we'll go forward then. Rule one: stand up straight with your shoulders back. Now that's one of those kind of like straightforward rules but in order to make it kind of within our day to day life, we have to have some sort of reminder to fix your posture. And so there's several different ways that you can go about doing that. Sumit had made the good point of if you exercise, do kind of core and also like back training, then you're kind of going to be automatically within that more straightforward posture, or not straightforward, but the more dominant or more courageous posture. That's it. Yeah, so if you exercise regularly, that aspect of yourself, you're going to be kind of regulated into remaining inside that good posture of the straight back and shoulders up. Another thing that you could do is maybe meditate, just so that you can have that reminder for whenever your mind wanders or anything like that, you'll have that reminder to, okay, just something that you can be more mindful of when and when not, when you are in posture, in that good posture, and when you're not. So, and then from there, make the correct action. For myself, whenever I had like certain things that I wanted to keep a daily reminder of, what I would also do is like set an alarm on my phone for like maybe every half hour or every hour. So what you can do is just use that maybe, and so every time you have that chime or whatever notification that you have, I use this app called Chimer, I think it is, and you can set like what parts of the day that notification will ring for, like every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, something like that. And yeah, just something that you can remind yourself to get into posture. Okay. And something else that you can do if you need a reminder and you don't want like a notification going on, you can have something like on your person that will, every time you see it, you'll remember, so that no matter where you go, so you can have this kind of reminder. For myself, I actually wear a bracelet, but not specifically for that reason, but just so that I can have a specific reminder with me at all times. If you regularly go, if like at your work, or maybe before heading out the door, you can like set up a piece of paper or some written. Oh yeah, that would actually be pretty good, is having all 12 rules like printed out on a piece of paper and maybe taped next to your door. So every time you leave your house, you'll have these kind of on your mind. I think that's actually what happened in a friend of Jordan Peterson's, Greg Hurwitz's book. The main protagonist would have the rules from Quora originally printed out and taped on his or her refrigerator. And then I guess in his later book, his most recent one, the character is actually reading the book. And they're both actually kind of like released at the same time. So yeah, that's something that you can do for rule 1, or really for all of the rules. Is would be good to have all 12 of them, especially just something to go over and remind yourself of what you're supposed to be doing. Rule 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. So yeah, this one is probably the hardest of all the rules to keep hold or keep diligent on. So we came up with quite a few different scenarios that you can do. So Peterson is always talking about setting up a schedule that and doing it in a way that you're like not a tyrant over yourself. And that last part is really the most important, because I don't know, you always have the ambitions to do as much as you can within a day. And like maybe some days you'll actually be able to achieve all of that. But let's face reality, you're not going to be that best version of yourself all of the time. So what we kind of came up with is set up a schedule that even the worst version of yourself would be willing or able to do. And so that kind of comes in several parts, because like you have to understand just what your limitations are. Say you have a specific bad habit that you're always going on, and even when you attempt to do the best day that you can, eventually that bad version of yourself will kind of take over, because they've been, I don't know, tyrannically enforced to commit to things that they don't want to do. And that's rough, because I don't know, we're kind of a dual person within us, of one that wants the best for us and one that wants the worst for us. And generally, the one that wants the worst for us can take control quite easily. So if you can set up a schedule, or like set up even just a day that even if that person isn't in charge, basically, then you're able to still commit to and accomplish the things that you want done. Both versions of you want done. So you have to kind of go through a way to kind of go through this that we discussed is just to better understand what it is that you do that's wrong. And so it's similar to the welcome back, Sumit. Sorry. What we discussed was like writing out what is your worst, like if the worst version of yourself could create its own schedule for you, what would it have you do throughout that entire day? And so it's basically the worst things that you could do for yourself, and that your worst version wants for yourself. And that's not going to be like self-destructive, really. I mean, of course, in the long run, all of them probably will be self-destructive, but you got to remember that the worst version of yourself still wants to survive to a point that it can continue committing all the worst things that it can. And then also writing out a list of what the best version of yourself would want to accomplish during the day. And so if you can go through, maybe compare notes between them, and then so set up a schedule that even the worst version of yourself would be willing and able to do. Go through those 2 different days and see where you can compromise in situations. Or if you see that there's maybe a shared commonality between specific things in that day, say, okay, the worst version of yourself wants to eat junk food or something like that. And the best version of yourself wants you to maybe do good chores while you eat. Maybe you can compromise in some sort of way where you're eating junk food, but you're reading while you're doing it, or something to that effect, where it just kind of go through, see what it is that worst version of you wants and the best version of you wants. And then at least if you do that, hopefully you can get to a schedule that you're able to continue and repeat. And of course, it's not going to be a good schedule, but at least it'll be something that you're familiar with and you're able to build off of. That's the main goal, is to start in a place that you're comfortable with, or mostly comfortable with, and then build up from there. To once you start a habit, it becomes easier and easier every time you go through with it. So yeah, that's one piece of advice for rule 2. Meditation is, it's not really meditation, but just the mindfulness is really however you can go about doing that in your all throughout your day. Just to notice every time that the worst version of yourself is kind of in control, and maybe keep track of that to see what it was that caused that to happen. And see if there's something that you can maybe do in the future to divert that from happening. Or really, you want to set up a scenario where you're not in constant battle within yourself between the best version of yourself and the worst version of yourself. You want to use both of yourselves to the fullest potential that is productive. And so the reason that I think the worst version of yourself tends to take over is because there's been something that it's been needing that the best version of yourself isn't willing to give it. And I mean, usually that's probably for a good reason, but if he is constantly taking over, then you need to not let him do that anymore. And in order to do that, you kind of have to make agreements with him. And that's the thing. It's not like handing him the keys to your car. It's setting up some sort of compromise between both versions of yourself so that he's not able to just steal the keys whenever he wants and take over and kind of like ruin all the progress that you've made. So that's what I think it is. When the worst version of you takes over, the reason he's doing that is because he has some sort of need or desire that is not being fulfilled. And he's going to take whatever it is that he's desiring, and the best version of yourself is basically powerless because all this time, the best version of yourself has been constantly at struggle to keep the worst version of yourself from getting things. And so over time, that's going to wear him down to the point that the worst version of yourself is finally able to take over. So set up some sort of, or like go through, what are the desires that aren't being fulfilled that the worst version of yourself is attempting to accomplish? And then see is there some sort of better way that you can get those needs filled that both of you can agree on. Okay. Throughout the book, never mind. Another piece of advice is to set up a plan B or set of routines in the case of unplanned circumstances. So I've noticed that if I have a routine, things go great. I can stick to my routine and I can continue on from there. But as soon as there's some sort of hiccup to that routine, something gets changed, then I tend to go downhill fast. And you can kind of see the same thing with the sorting myself out guy on YouTube. I think he had talked about how he had this great routine that he was going with, morning routine, and then he hurt his back, and then after that it basically just wiped him out, so that he couldn't accomplish anything that he wanted to do. It was very easy to just go into complete self-destructive mode and just not do anything. Or it's not really self-destructive, it's just apathetic.
I think it's part of that thing Peterson was talking about, where he had to teach his daughter how to
Mm-hmm.
not use her illness as an excuse for not achieving things in life, like figuring out which are the things that you like genuinely can't do because of your illness,
Mm-hmm.
right? As opposed to you just using them as an excuse. So uh, I see that, like, even when I hurt my shoulder, right, I stopped going to
Mm-hmm.
the gym. But
Mm-hmm.
so that was it. That was just part of the routine. But I stopped the whole routine because of that. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm injured, so uh, I somehow use that as an excuse to stop the whole process.
Mm-hmm. So if we can set up, like, say we have, because when we have the routine going, we're good. But there's always going to be something outside of our control that interferes with that. And so if we can take the time to set up a secondary routine, or maybe even a tertiary routine, if that one fails too, so that even in these worst situations where something unexpected happens that stops us from accomplishing our normal routine, or whatever we're setting out to do, we can have some sort of lesser version of that. That way we can kind of stay on track. It's not like every time there's something in the middle of the road, you have to swerve your car out of the way and hit a tree. You can understand, or set up kind of a secondary road that you can use, that you can just divert yourself onto, so that nothing doesn't come at you with a devastating blow. It's just it's a blow that you're able to kind of roll with. So yeah. Another piece of advice: set up a compromise so that the darkest part of yourself will not be tyrannical in the same way you were to it. So I kind of went over this already, but so you have to be sure. The reasoning, I think at least, that the worst version of myself takes over is because the best version of myself was attempting to stifle it, and to kind of keep it hidden and buried. And if you do that, then you got to always treat your enemy in the same exact way that you're going to be wanted to be treated by them. So if when your enemy's weak and you punish them for it, like if the worst version of yourself is currently, I don't know, just not able to take control, and you stifle it, then the worst version of yourself is going to be doing the same exact thing to you. So you got to set up some sort of internal dialogue with it in yourself. And I did this by like writing down an actual kind of like dialogue. Just set up two different characters between yourself and go through it that way. Just so that you can come to some sort of agreement within your base goals. Because the reason the worst part of yourself is doing something is because there's some sort of need that is not being fulfilled. And so you got to look at it and see if maybe there's some deeper need behind that the worst version of yourself is just using this more superficial act in order to accomplish, or at least to get closer to that sort of need. Of course, all of these kind of things are vague, but perhaps they can be useful for you to kind of fill in the gaps for your own problems or whatever it is that you're going through. Just, where was I? Okay, make a to-do list of things that you're already going to be doing. So this was an idea. The reasoning for this was to decrease the imposing nature of having a to-do list. So for myself, I've noticed that I'll like usually write down a to-do list at the beginning of the day, and then by the end of the day, I'll see I didn't really do any of them, or maybe I did one out of the 7. And so it's something that I'm regularly avoiding or just keeping out of my mind, because these are all things that I probably subconsciously know I don't want to do, or that I'm not going to be able to do. So there's a little bit of an idea to create a list of things that we're already going to be doing, just so that we can continually go back to that list, cross it off. And maybe it's even like stupid things, like just things that are already part of your habits, maybe, that you can just go back to the list and cross it off. That way, the list is no longer outside of management. You're able to return to it and conquer it by that crossing off nature. And maybe that'll keep the imposing nature of such a to-do list from being in that way anymore. Like if you have both of the, if like they're all part of the same list, I don't know, maybe that's lying to yourself in a certain way, that you're, I've gotten a lot done because I've crossed off half my list. But I don't know, maybe it'll help in accomplishing more in your list, in your day-to-day life. I don't know. It's at least something worth trying. That's what all of these are. These are not tested plans yet. These are all very much just precursors to things. And so that's why I kind of have a lot. That way we can go through, test which ones work, which ones don't. And maybe they'll work for some people and won't work for others, but it's really all about the individual, so that you take these lists of advice, try out the ones that you think might work. If they work, great. If they only partially work, maybe you can fix them for yourself, and maybe you can help. They're all going to be listed in the Jordan B Peterson .community message boards. Let me see if I got the link to that. The link to that will be in the description of all of these kind of listed out, and hopefully better formulated, but oh well. Okay, yeah, this kind of goes back to an earlier plan. Prepare and expect failure for everything that you set out to do, so that you're already ready for it in case it does. So, yeah, what at least stops me a lot of the time from doing things that need to be done is I don't know, it's kind of that archetypal fear of the unknown. So perhaps by taking the time to see or to imagine just how everything horrible that could happen does happen. Everything that way it kind of it turns it out of being the unknown and turns it into being a known fear. That's something that comes up in his book a couple times. I think later on from Rule 2, though. Keeping things vague makes it so that you can avoid them. But by taking the time to structure something, then you're going to be more familiar with it and comfortable with it, and it's easier to adapt to those things occurring. So, yeah. And I think this can be something for like short-term goals and long-term goals. Having the plans for everything that you do fail. That way, if and when they do, you're ready for it and you already know what you're going to be doing in those cases. So, yeah, plan on failure. That way, if you actually succeed, then, that's a surprise. There you go. Good for you. Plan for failure and know what you're going to be doing in case of that failure. Okay. Yeah. Imagine that you're a small child that has to do certain things. How are you going to coax them into doing it, being a small child? This kind of goes into this was actually like one of the most direct pieces of advice from that chapter, and this kind of fits into the worst version of yourself. Imagine the worst version of yourself is that small child, or there's this TED talk that talks about the monkey mind. I think also Tim Ferriss goes into that side of yourself that is able to take control and then just go crazy, do all the things that it wants to do. It's very impulsive, just like a toddler. So imagine that you yourself are that toddler, and you have a certain set of tasks that you want to get that toddler to do. How are you going to get a toddler to do certain things? And since we're not toddlers, like, we're usually able to just kind of buck up and do the things that we don't want to do in certain cases, but that's not a long-term solution. That's something that will make us, or make parts of ourselves, hate having to be forced into doing something. In order to get a toddler to do something, you have to make that toddler want to do it. So set up some sort of way that toddler version of yourself is willing to do the things that it has to do. Give it rewards. And make sure they're rewards that toddler already wants. And of course, I'm not talking about a toddler. I'm talking about you yourself. So you're able to know exactly what the worst version of yourself wants. So if you can give it small pieces of that by accomplishing the things that you want done, then good for you. You've got at least something to build off of. Be compassionate for yourself. Yeah, that's important. And you can't be too hard on yourself whenever you fail at things. You have to, because by doing that quickly makes you not want to do things ever again. If you set out a whole set of plans for what you're going to do today, and then you don't do any of them, you're going to hate yourself, and you're not going to want to set out goals for yourself anymore. So you need to take the time to appreciate the things that you are doing. And that, if you can turn that into like a daily thing, like I've been recently attempting Tim Ferriss's like bullet journal thing at the beginning of each morning. And there's one section that is I'm grateful for. And that's usually grateful for the things around you. But I think I need to add, or maybe change that to be things that I'm grateful for within myself, that I've actually accomplished, that I can be proud of. And then I'm going to get that kind of reward sense for actually accomplishing these things. Yeah, you got to take the time, even for small goals, for small victories. You got to appreciate those. Let's see. Yeah. Keep track of the things you've done that you're proud of. Take the time to appreciate yourself and others. Yeah. So that's rule 2. And the different pieces of advice to accomplish that. And I think rule 2 is probably the hardest to actually keep to in a true way. It's at least for myself, it's a hard one to keep. Anything, Sumit?
Just that, okay. I'm not very optimistic right now. Like, I keep trying these things and keep failing. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of for myself as well. I haven't like tried any of these things yet, just because it's been we kind of went through them yesterday, and there's kind of a lot to go through. So a lot of these will need to be kind of simplified, or maybe taken one at a time. Like, just to focus on one of these pieces of advice, try it for a day or 3 days or something like that. See how useful it is. And if it is useful, keep it and maybe grab another piece of advice from these things. And then see if that works. If it doesn't, trash it. Maybe grab something else, or come up with something else that is getting you to where you want it. So that's the thing. You got to be, even when you fail at something, take that as a victory, because that tells you what strategies didn't work, and then you can try a different strategy. Okay, rule 3. Make friends with people who want the best for you. Okay. So, in certain cases, it's easy to make like superficial friends, or at least just friends in the case that these are people that are nearby you and you're able to interact with regularly, and so you have kind of certain common values and goals and structures that you're within. So like work friends or people that you share a hobby with and you visit with them, and so that's a good, I guess, building block for getting some people, or even like people have childhood friends from school that's how they got them, is just because both of them liked a certain thing, and then from there they shared what other things that they happen to like. So yeah, in order to make friends, just search for people who want similar goals that you do, similar values that you have. So for myself, I recently read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and it seems to be one of the most prominent books that should be read by, or at least it's the most prominent book that I've read that I want to I don't know, kind of build my life around in a way. And so one strategy I have for myself is to find other people that have that similar set of values. And so there's several different like Dale Carnegie training courses that I'm at least looking into. There's one that's nearby me, so I may be looking into that, just so that I can have the same people that have the same values as I do. And that this isn't necessarily for a selfish reason, like that I want them to give me all the stuff that I want. This is more for being around them will. There's a quote by Tim Ferriss, or at least that he uses regularly. You are the average of the 5 people that you hang around with most. So, or it's not even hang around with, it's like interact with most. So take the time to analyze who are those 5 people that you see most often. Are any of them negative for you? Or do any of them kind of share like a core value that you do not want to have, or that you don't have? And maybe you find certain people, be it through hobbies or maybe similar locations like the gym or a park or something like that, and just find those people that have similar values that they hold, that they are at least acting out. Maybe church. If there's people go to church for relief, I suppose. So maybe, I don't know, even if you're an atheist, or there could be good people there in church that you want to hang around with, that you want to emulate. Even if you don't believe the same things that they do, if they act out a life that you admire in certain respects, try to be around them. Do the same things that they do. Yeah. So also for gaining friends, you have to, okay, you don't have to. A piece of advice, maybe, this is mostly for myself too, is to first show the other person how you yourself can be a benefit to them. Because, I mean, the whole point of this rule is to find people that want the best for you. So if you can prove to other people that you are a valuable aspect to their life in certain respects, and whatever it is that you're maybe skilled at, maybe you can help them with, and something that benefits them, then they're going to want that reciprocal nature of friendship to pass along to you. So taking that kind of first step to give them something that they're maybe wanting or needing within their own, maybe even unknowingly, like something that you give to them or share with them can benefit them that they were kind of struggling with previously. Maybe that's a way to at least start a first step with a meaningful friendship. So yeah, to do that, you place the other person's interests above even your own. And like for myself, I started off as kind of a pseudo objectivist in a Ayn Rand book club. So that is kind of something that I'm sure objectivists and those that are rationally self-interested are going to be wanting to reject automatically. But I think that if you're really looking for your own self-interest, then in certain cases you're going to have to put other person's interest above even your own, because for the long-term meaningful friendships that you desire, if you're rationally self-interested, you're going to want to desire, you have to place the other person in certain cases their interests above your own. And this is like something in the case of like marriages too. A marriage probably is one of those things that you have to get right primarily, because you're going to be spending the most amount of time with that person. So you got to make sure it's a smooth relationship, that you guys have shared common values, and so discuss the things that you want for yourselves, and what it is that you maybe discuss your ideal day, how you would go through each of those days, and see where it is that you guys have connections, and then maybe spend the time to share those shared ideals, or however you spend your day in that manner. Maybe like both of you like to take walks. Maybe that can be something that you share and then thus create a bond with. And then for the other things that you both have kind of contradictory goals that you have for your days, maybe those things can be things that make them more individual, that you don't have to share. Finding people that you can be and are honest with and argue with. So yeah, this is hard to do, because in order to be honest with somebody, you have to say stupid things quite often. And if you're within a group or with a friend that when you say those stupid things, they automatically think the worst, or they want to automatically correct you without hearing you and hearing what you're attempting to say, then that needs to be fixed in certain ways, or in whatever way is necessary. So for myself, I had a group of friends that was kind of like that. And so maybe it was the easier solution to just kind of cut off that relationship and kind of go on and do different things. But perhaps the more meaningful approach would be to discuss that, how these things made me feel, how their quick objections to whatever I would say would be impactful into my psyche, or not even psyche, just into my feelings. So it made me feel as if none of them wanted to hear anything I wanted to say. So just all these pieces of advice are definitely much harder to actually go through and deal with than I can say all of these things, and that means nothing. The actual hard part is actually implementing them. And so I realize that. So this podcast itself is meaningless unless there's something that you take out of it and attempt. And I'm saying this to myself too. Uh, find it. Oh yeah, and placing the person that you want as a friend or that you have as a friend, treating them as if they are an end unto themselves. So not thinking of them insofar as they benefit you, which is kind of, I don't know, it could be an interpretation of the rule itself, to find people who want the best for, or make friends with the people who want the best for you. And that could be rationally self-interested, looked at and then implemented, so that only people that are serving you in certain respects, not like serving you as a slave, just people that benefit you. It could be that that's how you look at it. But in order to get actual friendly relationship, there's that reciprocal exchange of benefits between each other. So you have to give in order to get. Maybe, I don't know, probably my objectivist philosophy understanding was quite weak, since basically anything can be rationalized into, oh, that's actually towards your self-interest. This is your long-term self-interest to act altruistically in this certain respect. So maybe objectivism really is quite the useful approach, but I don't know. For at least in my experience, objectivism was used in order to rationalize away the things that were harmful for yourself. So like, people were unwilling to compromise because they're so built. No, people are unwilling to compromise for a greater benefit to them, because they were so stubborn, maybe, or yeah, like in the case of the Fountainhead, Howard Rourke, he's just one of those guys that he'll only do what he wants to do, and there's nothing that you can do to kind of change him. If he doesn't want to do something, he'll go through hell, kind of literally, just to avoid it. And I don't know. I saw that in the case for the objectivist groups that I've witnessed or been a part of, that in order to increase themselves, they could have increased themselves by compromise, but instead, just like in the case of Howard Rourke, he could have done great things by teaming up with Peter Keating. Yeah. But no, he didn't want to do that. So,
No,
and
those things were
like,
not great in his opinion.
yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah, Howard Rourke is definitely commendable, and he's kind of that perfect ideal in that he only does what he thinks is for the best for him. And so, yeah, I mean, he stood up against the tyranny, and I don't know. In certain cases, there's something I read from Tribe of Mentorers. One of the authors in it was talking about how the Fountainhead for him was very useful by seeing how Peter Keating and Howard Rourke are two parts of the same person, like, for at least for him himself. So that in certain cases, you have to be the Peter Keating in order to I don't know. Yeah, if you're compassionate, that's part of your personality. So you're going to be the Peter Keating in that situation, and that makes you feel better. And also, it benefits you because the other person doesn't just feel like, oh, I'm using you. Because like, that's the case with Howard Rourke. Everybody hated him, or like kind of respectative, and that's the thing I see with objectivism is it's very much tailored towards a disagreeable personality. So anyone that has a disagreeable personality is going to instantly gravitate towards Ayn Rand's work and just fall in love with objectivism because that is who they are. But that's the thing. Most people, I don't think, are Howard Roark. Most people are kind of the mix between. So being Howard Roark doesn't work for the people that have a temperament of being compassionate and altruistic. Anyway, it's a offshoot of where we're supposed to be going. Anyway, yeah, placing the other person's as if they putting the other person in your mind as an end unto themselves. It's a confusing statement, and I don't think I really understand it myself. What does it mean for a person to be an end unto themselves, not a means to an end? So maybe that's it. You're not looking at your interactions as if you have some sort of end that you're trying to go for, and you're going to be communicating in a specific way towards that end. Maybe it is useful if you both share that same end. So we'll actually get into that later, actually, but you can't have contradictory ends that you're kind of both using each other towards, because you're just going to get nowhere. And yeah. Did you have anything to say for rule 3?
Actually, there is a kind of a way to, how do I say this? I doubt if you can do things you don't want to do for long for somebody else without being resentful.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, the values thing matters a lot. For example, I had a friend, and he had called someone for help. He was in a lot of trouble, and that person wouldn't help him, wouldn't talk to him, because his value system said that he only wants to be around winners.
Mm.
So then in that case, since he's not a winner anymore, then that interaction wouldn't make sense for him. And when I was talking to him, I was like, I like if I could help this guy even a like little bit, that would be great. Like I'm making a contribution to like somebody's else's life, right? And you when you make it when they are younger, then it kind of has this kind of a domino effect for the rest of their life, right? So I care about that sort of thing. So I want to get involved with those sort of things. So I helped him out, and
Mm-hmm.
we were able to kind of build a relationship. So there is such a thing. Having those kind of values does help you kind of build those kind of relationships.
Yeah. So you wanted the best for them long term, and yeah, I think that's how rule 3 kind of works: is make friends with people who want the best for you, and in order to do that, you have to want the best for other people, or want the best for your friends. It's kind of a snake eating its own tail situation where it's a continual. It's a positive feedback loop.
Yeah, actually you have to kind of value that, and you kind of have to enjoy that. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you help people succeed, when you can see that, like it's not about taking credit for that. It's about just
Mm-hmm.
stepping back and making a contribution. And no, you are not stepping back when you made a contribution. You just kind of step in, make the contribution, then step out, and then just see what happens, and to able to build better people. So if you can derive a great deal of meaning or pleasure from that, that's really cool. uh,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like a miracle, when you can actually do that. with someone. So if you
Mm-hmm.
value that, you might be able to, but then you become kind of a service provider in a sense, and you have to then run into people who actually want the best for themselves, and want to do better, and want to do things right.
Mm-hmm.
If you run into one of those materialistic people who just want to have fun, so they your model will just not work with them. You will just be wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
So it does limit the type of people that you can have that relationship with.
Yeah. And that's another part is, yeah, to move on from those acting against yours and theirs self-interests. So people that are not thinking long term for themselves, or for you, or even really thinking that much at all about themselves, or about those around them. And maybe you can help them, but if they don't want to be helped, and they want to continue on with that strategy for how they live, then it's not something that helps you at all. So maybe you can avoid them and cut ties, or at least minimize how much time you actually interact with them. And maybe be honest with them for why you're doing that, so that if they want to interact with you more often, then they can at least know what it is that they're doing, and maybe want to change it in the future. Um, yeah, another part about having real friends with is having people that you can say unsaid things to. So I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but having those people that are willing to hear your faulty ideas, or and not even just ideas, just things that you have uh, hidden within you, that need to be kind of expressed in some sort of manner, and then discussed with the proper respect for each other, not just instantly shut up, and to the point where you have to place those uh, thoughts deeper and deeper into your subconscious, so that you are repressing them. But something that you can discuss and be illuminated by through the discussion on what your faulty thinking is, or what their faulty thinking is. Something that you can get somewhere, instead of having these kind of repressed ideas, or repressed speech within yourself, because that harms you. Yeah. Like you had talked about during the discussion, how there's maybe two tables of people. One table, as soon as something maybe bitter gets said, then there's some sort of mediator in between us. That, okay, let's not talk about that. Let's just move on, talk about something else that we can all discuss happily, or something like that. And then you have another table, which is like people kind of like uh, very passionately arguing against these two different situations. And then, I don't know, that second table is more honest, at least, and it's not lying to it. It's not lying to itself as a group, or as a whole. It's not repressing anything. It's getting things spoken outwards. And even if it's like instantly combated with a differing argument against that, at least it's been spoken and allowed to be spoken. That's that's the key component, is to have these things at least allowed to be said.
I think I can
Um,
add to that. So
yeah.
like this whole point you're making about discussing things. So this one time a friend of mine calls me and he says, "Hey man, what's wrong? What's going on?" So I told him, "Let's not talk about the things that we cannot survive."
Hmm.
So it was he was bringing up something that if we started if we started discussion on that, then uh, the situation will get so heated up that we'll be like no longer friends. So
Hmm.
I told him not to discuss it at all. So I remember doing that. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. You had talked also about this other relationship that your friend had with you, that he thought that by saying something, it was actually potentially harming or was going to kind of end the relationship that the two of you had between each other. So he wasn't acting within his rational self-interest, because by doing so, he would be losing a friend. He was saying something more honest that is. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Let me mute myself for a second. Gosh dang it. Sorry. uh, I'll call him back. Yeah, you want to tell that story real quick? I'm going to mute myself, and I'll be back within a couple minutes, okay?
All right. Okay, so it was actually the same friend. So uh, the okay, so there will be times where I'll like decide to do something and announce my plans, and uh, then this friend, he was in a situation where like I was helping him out, like emotionally, financially. He was not doing so great, and there'll be times we would be discussing things, and I'll tell him what I'm going to do, what the plan is, and later on he would call me back and tell me that uh, tell me things that I don't want to hear, and since I felt so passionately about my plan, uh, he knew how I would react, and he had to say things to me that I just am not interested in hearing. So uh, things that could actually end the relationship, right? So he would call me up and say, "Hey, Sumit, look, you are about to do something that is obviously very stupid to me, and here is why it is stupid. And I know you could now get angry with me and uh, like no longer help him because he's saying those kind of things, but he's willing to take that risk because he doesn't want me to go out there and like fail and embarrass myself like that. So so that was an interesting relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had that higher value of you as a person succeeding, even where it would detriment himself personally. He had that kind of desire for you to fix whatever, or he was acting within your long-term self-interests, even when it conflicted with his, uh, at least within his own self-interest. Yeah, which is.
Yeah, but it's interesting to handle those situations well. I believe he handled it well because he would actually explain to me what he's doing. Like, hey man, I know you could like get really upset about this, but I'm still doing
Mm-hmm.
it because of that. So that was a really interesting way of handling the situation. And we also discussed how introspection is important in relationships because. When you are being told things that you just don't want to hear, you hate the other person. Like that other person becomes this, snake,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really uncomfortable feeling, and it takes like a couple of days for that thing to sink in, and you realizing,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that person actually did me a favor, even though I really hated him when he did that.
Uh-huh. So yeah, if you can kind of go through the relationships that you have with people and think about, are there things that I think that I wouldn't be able to say to them? It's a, it's a rough thing to kind of go through, and because depending on the group of friends or even the friend as an individual, there's probably going to be at least certain things that you can't say to any of them. And so if you can find a friend that you can say anything that you think to them, and they're able to deal with that or respond to that in a useful manner, then great. I mean, that's fantastic. But if if not, you still need those things that you are thinking that you can't say to anyone, let out somehow. So, I mean, for myself currently, I mean, this kind of group during our discussions is basically that outlet for me to all the things that I've been kind of like thinking about over the week, or different considerations that I've had. We're able to discuss them and conversate upon them, and even basically what we do during the weekends is to think aloud, out loud. So actually taking the time to put forward a possibility, consider the possibility, and then see where that possibility is faulty, maybe. And what's great about that I love about this group is it's not, maybe it's because it's actually online, that the things that we say are not seen as an identity. We're kind of like combating each propositions that are being put forward as if they are a thing unto themselves. So there's no real like denigration of a person for saying a specific thing. It's always looking at that proposition or that thing kind of separate from the person, which probably is because it's online. There's that. It's a little bit easier to do so, and then just breaking apart that proposition outside of the person who said it, which I find it quite useful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like if you talk about the broader like media and stuff, so you cannot bring up a subject or a disagreeable point of view without people associating that with your ID, and then everybody thinks you are a bad person, right? Like if you start discussing that, hey, maybe we shouldn't do so much of this socialism thing, then immediately you become a mean person or something like that.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. You can see what happened to Peterson with that Vice interview. He brought forward things that he was thinking of that in regards to women in the workplace, and not with any like steadfast. Well, I don't know, potentially steadfast, I guess. I don't know what's going on within his own mind, but everyone used what he said as an identifier for who he is. And I've like seen several videos that have just been using that to say, this is Peterson's stance on women in the workplace. What the heck is wrong with him? And like another point from his Camille Paglia conversation, how he was talking about the unconscious interactions between men is this potential threat of violence, that if things get out of hand, that there's always that possibility. And so he talks about how with women that there's never really that possibility. And so people took that to be an identifier of who he is. Peterson is the person that now wants to have that threat of violence with women, so that if a woman says something disagreeable, there's that potential that can be manifested in certain situations. But yeah,
So here is how
that's
this.
the
Okay.
No, go ahead.
So here is how this works. Like your brain, you know how they say your brain is a computer, right? They draw all these analyses. So your brain is a computer which has got all this stuff going on, and in that you have this thought, and you are kind of then you choose to express that thought, and just because you did that somehow becomes your identity. I mean, which is really strange because brain is capable of thinking the opposite thought the very next second.
Yeah. All right. Rule 4. No, wait. No, I just did. Oh, no. Yeah, rule 4. Okay. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. This one's probably the most useful and straightforward rule that you can apply to yourself. So, this is kind of more personal case. What I did that was partially inspired by this rule, but also from another book that I've read called "Don't Shoot the Dog" by Karen Pryor. She suggested if you want to increase certain habits with yourself is to kind of keep track of your progress on those habits. So what she said was to create some sort of poster board or like sheet of paper that you can put on a wall somewhere and mark, like with push pins or bobby pins, something to that case, of each different goals that you have in like different colors. So each goal has a different color. Hey, Coda. Just so that you can, each day you can mark your progress, and then as the month goes on, you can see what you're excelling at and what you need improvement on. And so I actually did something, since I have quite a large collection of Lego pieces. I kind of thumbtacked a large Lego base plate to my wall, and then I just use the little 1x1 colorful bricks, and I kind of place that on the studs corresponding to how much I've achieved in that thing. So like for how many pages read, I use each stud to kind of signify, okay, this is 10 pages. So if I've read 40 pages in a day, I'll put a Lego piece, a green Lego piece, at 4 studs up. And then the next day, I'll move to the right 1 stud, and then say I get 60 pages, I'll put it 6 studs up. And I do that with different colors. And you can do this in many different ways. But yeah, make a physical chart of your progress in multiple fields. And then along with that, you can test different strategies for how to succeed at, like, it. That way you can at least look at, okay, on this day, I read a whole lot. What was it that caused me to read that much in comparison to all these other days? What was different, and how can I try to utilize that again into the future? Another part of for Rule 4 is to scale down all of your goals to be achievable. So this is something that I always fail at. I'll have some sort of like thing that I want to do for the month, and I'll do like, okay, I want to write a screenplay, just because that's what I do in my spare time. So I'll have that's my month goal, and then I never really make any progress with that. So that and so my at least strategy here is to scale down my goals to be achievable. So I can have that month goal, but that's not going to help me in actually achieving that goal. What I need to do is to think of what I can actually do in my day-to-day life. And Sumit came up with a good point of scaling it down so far that it's minute and super easy. So like, here's your goal for today, or like, here's your first goal. Go grab a pen. Okay, I can do that. Okay, there's my pen. I got my pen. Okay, what's my next goal? Okay, find a piece of paper. Okay, let me find it. Okay, here's a piece of paper. Next goal. Write down 5 character names. Okay, yeah, I can do that. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, great. Okay, next goal. Have a plan for what does each character want? Boom, I can do that. Okay, and then just kind of breaking it all down into these small things. That having a goal that you can actually accomplish in the moment or within the moment. That way you can build off of that. So you have this one thing that you can do within the next 1 minute, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. You do that. Okay, now that I've done that, I can do, what can I do now? Okay, come up with that and then do so. So yeah, I wrote down here, tiny tasks, just because that's a very fun phrase to keep in your mind. tasks that you can actually build off of. Because having the goal, write a screenplay in 1 month. And of course, I'm using all the things that are personal to me. So you're going to have to swap out to be something that, whatever long-term goal that you have. Maybe learn to play a specific song on an instrument, and you want to do that within the next 2 weeks. So you're not going to be able to just do that within the next 5 minutes. So scale down to what can you achieve that relates to that overall goal within the next 1 minute. Okay, grab a guitar or whatever instrument you have. Okay, I can do that. Do that. Okay, play a note. And then work on from there. Yeah, just having these tiny tasks that you can actually achieve, and then come up with the next task after that. And Sumit made the good point of having something that is actually physical, because like having the overall goal of, say, like be a better wife, or write a screenplay, or read 10 books. These are all things that are too abstract, maybe. They're too far ahead that we don't, it's not like something that we can do physically and know how to do it physically, because it's something that is built up of a multitude of micro tasks. So yeah, just finding those micro tasks that are actually physical. That I don't know if I brought this up already, but instead of using goals, have strategies. So yeah, setting strategies instead of goals. I mean, you can have goals as well, but in order to actually do things, you have to have an actionable plan. This is kind of like what we're doing right now, is to think of your goal, and then break it down into what's a small thing that I can do. Yeah, something that I can do. That's a core aspect of a strategy, because a goal just tells you what you're aiming at. It doesn't tell you at all how to get there. You have to come up with strategies and then test those strategies. If they work, great, continue on. If they fail, scrap it. So yeah, setting strategies instead of goals. So another thing, like for myself personally, I keep a journal. I'll tend to write a page just before bed, and then over the month, or no, at the end of the month, I'll go through and read all of it. And that's useful, but it's also, I think, too large of a time span to kind of go without follow up. And so, yeah, I have here weekly course correction. So I'm going to take the time to look back at all the things I set out to do during a week. Find out what have I made progress on, what have I not made any progress on. And then see, have I made progress in the wrong things? Am I working towards goals that aren't really useful to me? And then maybe, now that you have that smaller window of what you've accomplished and what you're on the way to accomplish, maybe you can cut it off at the roots and not follow up on it, because it's something that's not going to be even useful to you into the long run. So also, this is something I need a lot more work at. Forgive your failures. So I noticed a lot at the start of a month, or like during a month, I'll be like, I need to do such and such and such, and then I'll usually end up saying like that for 6 different things, and then at the end of the month, I'll be reading back on it like I only did 1 or 2 of these, and then I'll be not resentful but upset that I wanted to do these 6 different things, and 4 of them I didn't do. I need to be more aware of, or not more aware. I need to be more self-forgiving of those situations, because it's okay to have plans and then realize that those plans aren't for the best for you, and then not follow up on those plans. And if I set out on like great plans and then I never make any progress on it, maybe that's an indication that the plans I set out to do were too ambitious for my current state. And so maybe they can be accomplished at a later point in time, but right now I need to focus on smaller things. So yeah, here's another thing that I kind of talked about earlier. Write down the worst day that you've ever had. This is useful, I think, in knowing where you can go wrong. It's kind of similar to the future authoring program, but I think it's more actually...
Is this the same idea as this anti-you? What was the term you used?
Yeah, the anti-ideal.
Okay,
so,
right.
So if you have basically your worst day that you could ever have, or maybe that you have already had, something where you like wasted the entire day. It was one not worth living, maybe, or that's probably too I don't know, too far in that. But a day that you mostly regret. Just having a list of all the things wrong with that day. Use that as a baseline. Use that as kind of a reverse goal that you have. And so you have that day, and then maybe tomorrow you're going to have that same day, but you're going to not do like 1 or 2 or 4 things on that list. And then maybe that can become your new day. But that might be too strict. Maybe
actually, I do have something to add on that. Like, remember we were discussing about how you have to break down your goal into very detailed steps. Like, open your notebook, pick up the pen, like that.
Yeah.
So you might be able to like find the one thing that really made that day the worst day, right? And then do the same for that. If you are talking about watching porn, what are all steps you involve? Like, you find where your computer is, you open it, so you bring it down to very like detailed steps. And the reason I'm telling you that is because then you have to kind of, you have like, let's just say we divide that into 15 steps. So you have the opportunity to stop it at any of those 15 points.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. Keeping like a track of that common thing that you have. That's so true, because that's, once you kind of get into a routine, you're very likely to continue on to the climax of that routine, or to the end point of that routine. So if you can break down that larger routine of go masturbate into 15 different steps, and you realize, oh shoot, I'm on step 4 right now. Maybe that can break out of your mind that one large step of things, that a set of instances that all lead to the same ending. Instead of seeing it all as one thing that happens automatically, thinking of it as 15 things that all happen in succession to each other, and seeing at what point you can cut off that from continuing. And usually, in order to do that, you have to create a new habit. So if you're already worked into a normal habit, and as soon as you see that you're in a certain place in that routine, you need to come up with a new step to get out of that routine. Or it's not get out of that routine, it's to have a new routine that is better aimed towards your goal. So this YouTube channel, oh gosh, I forget. I want to say it's What I've Learned, but I think it's a different YouTube channel. It's in that same kind of genre. It might actually be Coffee Break. Yeah, I think it's Coffee Break. He was talking about how he would spend his entire day on Reddit. And so what he did whenever he realized, or whenever he noticed himself opening up Reddit, then he would create a new routine that follows up with that. And he would stand up, walk around for 10 minutes, either outside or around his apartment or whatever, and then come back. And then that walking around for 10 minutes stopped, or at least broke up that routine of spending the entire day on Reddit or spending hours on Reddit. So you could probably do the same thing for, say, masturbation habits. If you notice that you're at a certain point in that list of routines, of micro routines, create a new habit or a new routine that follows up from, okay, as soon as I open up, what is it? Control Shift in. It's the whatever that is, incognito mode. As soon as I open up incognito mode, then I'm going to stand up, walk outside for 10 minutes, take a cold shower. These are all things that are a lot easier to accomplish at the beginning of a routine than halfway through. So if all of your bad habits start with the same originating action, such as opening up incognito mode or walking to or driving to a fast food restaurant, any bad habit that you have, if they all start with the same originating micro routine, from that micro routine, you can create a plan to have a continuing routine based off of that originating micro routine. Control Shift in, stand up, walk around 10 minutes. And that completely blows apart the, of course, this is all still speculation, but from a lot of the different things that I've listened to and read and things like that, it ideally can make a difference in those bad habits. Okay. But yeah, I like what you were saying, breaking it down into those micro tasks or micro routines so that you know where you are. And it breaks this one large thing that's outside of your control into 15 things that maybe these are a lot easier to control. Just like in the same way of having some large goal to do, like write 15 pages today. That's something that's big and outside of your control until you break it up into 20 different smaller increments of things to do. Cool.
Yeah, I had I think 1 point for the previous rule as well. I forgot to add it.
For friends
Making
who want
friends.
the
Yeah. So I don't know when that is a good time to add that.
Yeah, that's now's good.
Okay, so let me put it up. Okay, so sometimes remember how you were talking about how in this group we don't do this, we don't do that, right? So there is also this thing about like setting up norms. Like when you are into a new relationship, so sometimes the way I have seen it work is you go into you meet someone new, you go into a new interaction with them, and you are you in a way give them more respect than your best friend, because your best friend, you treat him like an idiot, like you call him mother this and you SOB, right?
Yeah.
But when you start interacting with someone, you give them like at least vocally, like the greatest respect, right? So you are being nice to them and everything, and over time, like you build that relationship, and then somebody would use some slang, and then you'd be like, okay, it's okay to use that slang in this relationship, or they would what I'm saying is relationship starts around in this politically correct bubble, right? And then one of the person is have to do something that is outside it, and then the bubble expands. So
Okay.
yeah. So that is how you kind of set up the kind of, I can say, the agenda for a relationship. The same way you can set up the agenda, like when you are building that new relationship, at some point I don't know what that way is, but you should find out a way to kind of set up the explicit agenda for that relationship, or maybe implicit. I don't know how that would work, of wanting what is best for the other person.
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah. And just from the example, like with your closer friends, you're capable of, yeah, like swearing in front of them and being crass in certain topics or things like that. So if you can take that as like a large routine, or not even routine, but a large like goal, or if say that's an endpoint that you want to be at, where you can say these types of things to these new acquaintances, and then turning that into, yeah, a set of micro routines. Say if you meet them like once a week, every week have some sort of small thing that's close to that. Like, I mean, if it's simple, but just something that we can build off of. Say you want to have that end goal of being able to swear in front of them casually, just because that's, I don't know, more comfortable for you and probably for them. It at least kind of creates that closer bond between you. Um, if you only meet them like once a week, or that first day, or not even the first day, maybe like the third day or that you meet, you'll use a harmless swear word or something like that. And then maybe the next week, something a little bit more common. I don't know. Depending upon your goal, you can break it down into a lot of smaller things. And even if you don't know all of the micro tasks within a large end goal, you at least have like certain ideas that maybe this is something that will build towards that, and that you don't know exactly what's going to come after that, but it's, excuse me, something to start on maybe.
yep. Because I feel if
Okay.
you don't explicitly
Mm-hmm.
start doing this shit, then uh, like how it is. Somebody has got to have some kind of plan for the relationship, uh, right? So
Mm-hmm.
uh, otherwise, it will just be what it will be, which it may not be what you want.
Mm-hmm. And maybe what your goal could be is to get to that point where you're able to communicate with them and talk about, okay, what could our shared goal be? Like, say you're married to somebody and you have all these like great plans that you have for what you want your individual life to be, but your partner is not interested in that right now. So if you can say your goal is to get them interested in self-improvement, or group self-improvement between each other, then break that down into micro uh, micro routines. Maybe send a 5-minute clip of Jordan Peterson to them. See if that takes seed, and then maybe build out from there and talk about these. Oh man, super. Maybe talk about like these things that have improved within your own life by this small set of self improvements, and maybe, I don't know, work outwards from there in small manners. That way, it stops things from being too imposing, because having a large ideal, that's like setting up, having a large goal is that ideal that you have to hold everything accountable to. And so having that there, it's very easy to ignore it. Say you have that monthly goal of accomplishing something, and it's easy to just ignore it and not work towards that at all. But if you can break that goal down into small things, you can accomplish the small things and then feel proud about that. All right. So yeah, we're talking about the anti-ideal of creating that large list of all the things that the worst day you could ever have, or that you have already had, and then just working backwards from there. Instead of like, yeah, it is similar to the whole future authoring program, but that's kind of that might be like too far in advance, like having a 5-year thing. It's something that is easy to ignore because it's 5 years ahead. Oh, I can start making improvements on my life in the next month, and then I'll still be able to get to that 5-year plan. Having something in the day-to-day, maybe even like, what is the worst, like say after you get off work, you usually have a set of bad habits. Like for myself, I would eat junk food and watch Netflix and then do nothing until bed, basically. So create that day or that set list of micro routines that all kind of work themselves into the larger routine of wasted afternoon or wasted evening. And yeah, so write all those out and then see what you can cross off of that list that you didn't accomplish. Setting a do not do list and then cross off the things that you successfully didn't do. I don't know. As I said, all of these things are very much hypotheses that I don't know how successful they'll be, but I've got a lot of them, so hopefully anybody listening can take a couple of them and test them out, see if they work for them or if they didn't, and if they have some sort of improvements to them, please share them, either in the message boards or in the comments below. Probably in the comments below, it'll be a little bit more instantaneous for other people watching or listening and able to see from. But yeah, and for myself as well, I need to actually implement a lot of these instead of just being some like lying preacher that talks about all these things that I should do, and then I just ignore them all. So, and since a lot of these are so long and complicated, I need to take out not take out. I need to formulate them up into the list, which they'll be in the message boards in the link below, and just take small instances of them. Like I'm only working on all these rule 4 or one of the strategies from rule 4 today, and see how successful that has been for my day. Yeah, and just to have that understanding that failure can be a success if you understand what made you fail. That's something that we always like, or at least I myself always beat myself up about whenever I fail at something, because I had these plans to do something and I didn't do it. If I instead look at it as if, okay, I didn't do all these things that I wanted to do. What caused me to do that? Okay, great. Now I know. Now I've got an idea. Now I know what I did that caused me to not get my shit together. I can just avoid that one specific thing, that originating factor that fucked everything up. Okay. Now I got to reread Rule 4 just so. Yeah, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today, just so it's in my mind again. So I have written out here, cut out anything that makes you feel small and weak. This is similar to what Peterson says about don't say anything that makes you feel weak. But there's a lot more to your life than just spoken word. It's actions. So maybe make a list of when you do things that make you feel weak. And then maybe make a list of things that when you do it makes you feel strong. And they can be like small or stupid things too. Like, I don't know, just like having a run, listening to a specific song. These are things that build me up. And so maybe if you find yourself, I don't know, just having those lists so that you know what parts of yourself make you what actions that you take that make you feel weak, and maybe avoid them, or at least cut down on as many of them as you can, and all the things that make you feel strong, and just so that you can have a clear understanding of which ones are wise for you to choose between. Okay, so we talked about the anti-ideal list of the worst day that you can ever have. And I already talked about this earlier, but also writing out maybe the best day that you could ever have. And these are all things that are probably way too long-term. So cut it down into things that are actually achievable. If you had the perfect day that you could ever have, actually make something that, or probably be better to build off of something that you've already done. So having the best day you've already had, because we've all had those days where we've accomplished a lot. And so look back, how did we spend that entire day? And break it down into those small routines, so that you know what went where. And then maybe compare the two between the worst day and the best day that you had. And see, okay, so it's obvious that the best day that you've had is not something that can be repeatable, because if it was, then it wouldn't be the best day. And the worst day you've ever had, that's obviously something that is also not really repeatable, because you're going to hate yourself by doing that, and you're always attempting to get out of that. So there's an inclination within you that wants to not repeat the worst day you've had. So look at the two and see what you can take from both of them. So this is kind of a argument against, I guess, my last point of cutting out all things that make you feel weak, since I'm sure most of the worst day that you've had is full of things that make you feel weak. But if you can use those things to benefit you in the best things that you want for yourself. So say you are addicted to sweets. If you can reward yourself with those technically detrimental things, these are short-term rewards. If you can use those rewards for whenever you accomplish something that works towards your long-term rewards or long-term goals. So yeah, these are a couple of ideas, and most of them are like half-baked. And so through action, they're actually going to be able to be fleshed out and better formulated so that you know what to do from there. And these are all basically lists of things for myself as well, because I've been attempting to sort myself out for the last 8 months, maybe, probably longer, but and it's very easy to see that I've made zero progress. So most of these things are all for myself, even if nobody else wants to utilize any of them. But I definitely want to better myself somehow. Right there. Okay, so yeah, we already talked about coming up with an alternate habit to replace a bad. So something from your worst day that's still okay. But also there's this addition to that. So seek out a alternate habit that still fulfills those needs. So the reason we do something is the reason we do something that's a bad habit is because we have a specific need that we want that isn't being fulfilled normally. So it could be a sense of excitement, maybe. Like within our body, there's this desire to have exciting things happen. And so it's very easy to fall into bad habits that is exciting. And so instead of going down the route of the bad habit, if we can replace that bad habit but still fulfill those needs of something exciting happens, or whatever it is that is the underlying reason for why we do a bad thing, which is usually a hard thing to go through, but it's very useful to know why you're doing something. So if you have that need for excitement and you notice you're about to go down that path of the bad habit because of the micro routines or the micro tasks that you've already gotten to a certain point, or you're about to start at a certain point, maybe there's something that you can do that fulfills that need, say, of excitement, just in this scenario. So think of something, this is all something that you have to set up prior to this, of course. So think of what would be a good replacement habit that still fulfills that need of excitement. Maybe it's jogging. Maybe it's watching a specific scary movie. Maybe it's, I don't know, some fun hobby that you have. Maybe it's like playing a game, or daydreaming, or something that you can replace that bad habit with. Sure, maybe it's something that isn't working towards your long-term goals, but it's still a part of yourself that has a need that needs fulfilled. I'm going to have to re-listen to this podcast, actually, and probably make notes for myself that I can actually work off of. Okay, yeah, and articulate your problem. So that works into basically all of these things. This is, if I were to condense down all of Peterson's book into these 3 words, this is what it would be: articulate your problems. Because as soon as you have the reason something is a problem is because you don't know why it's happening. If you can break it down into, this set of anything, to know why something's happening, then that will aid you in avoiding that problem or conquering that problem. Because that's the thing, problems have solutions, but in order to do that, you have to break it down into what are the components of this problem. Yeah, articulate problems. That's probably something it would be very worthwhile for me to write down and put somewhere in my room. And it's actually, funnily enough, I've been attempting to keep a list of problems, which probably isn't the best articulation that I could be doing, because all I'm doing is I'll sometimes carry a small notebook, and whenever I see some small problem, this corner is needs fixed, or there's something wrong in this specific part of my every day-to-day life, I'll write it down. And I think that's probably not the best, because it's similar to writing out long-term goals, because it's kind of putting it out into the major part. So I guess what I need to do is pick out one of those problems and then break it down to understand what caused it, and then how to, I don't know, slowly, or what are the micro tasks that could be done to avoid or fix that problem. Do you have anything to add, Sumit?
Nope.
Sorry, what was that?
Nope, not much.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Rule 5. We're not exactly going as fast, as quickly as possible, but really these first 4 were probably the ones that we took the most time on. And actually, yeah, for the rest, for the last 4, a lot of them are kind of self-explanatory as well. So, Rule 5: do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Now, for bachelors such as you and I, Sumit, this rule was probably the least important to us. So what we did during our discussion was to try to break it down into how does it relate to us in some sort of manner. And so I think it kind of relates back to what I was saying earlier, of treating yourself like you're a toddler, Or yeah, so imagine yourself as your own child, because that's kind of like what a child is it's a poor reflection basically of you as a person, because like, I mean, that's basically what a child is. It's somebody that is constantly emulating you, or the people that they see around them. That's children are mirrors to exactly what they have around them. So if a child is showing a poor trait, there's a good reason for that, and that can be pointed back at yourself. If you yourself are showing a poor trait, there's a good reason for that as well. So I have down here, treat yourself like your own child. Watch for, and this is something basically taken directly from the book. Watch for any good behaviors when you exhibit them, and reward yourself with a need in that moment. And so in order to do this, you have to really set up things prior to this happening. So that, all right, so in the book, Peterson talks about, this is one of the instances of actual straightforward advice and like an action plan within the book. Say your daughter is very non-communicative with you. She's very quiet and doesn't seem very open with anything. You need to watch for when she actually says anything. Like she makes something on her own, like a small anecdote about something that happened at school or something like that, or something that she likes. That's when you, in that moment, pay intense, close attention to what she's saying. And that's kind of like the reward that is being given for that action. I just, as I talked about, read Don't Shoot the Dog by Karen Pryor, which is all about positive reinforcement for behaviors that you want to repeat, or not just repeat, but you want to encourage. So anytime your child, or this could be worked outwards towards your spouse, maybe your employee or your coworker, or you yourself, whenever you're exhibiting a behavior that you want to encourage, in order to get that encouragement and the progression of that behavior, you have to reward it in the small steps, or you have to reward it in the present for those small steps towards the end behavior that you're wanting to achieve. So, like I said, this requires setup, especially if you're doing it for yourself. So one idea I had was like, consider something that you want that is like a kind of prime desire, or one of your more animalistic, I guess, desires. So I think for most people, it's probably easily condensed down to, say, sugar, because like we've evolved to desire that sugar that we have. And so if you can maybe set aside a time, or not a time, but set aside a certain amount of treats for yourself, only when you're actually exhibiting behavior that you want to encourage. So say you finally exercised in the morning, and maybe it's a small amount of exercise, like you were only able to do it for 5 minutes. If you're doing that, quickly go get that treat or have it at hand somewhere, and reward yourself for that. And I know it's counterintuitive towards the actual exercise, but it's quite intuitive because it's rewarding that behavior. And so your body unconsciously is going to be wanting to gain that reward for basically everything it does. You're unconsciously working towards rewards. And that's like exactly what masturbation is that desire to get that bodily reward, that orgasm, that feeling of intense pleasure. So if you can give the rewards to good behavior, then your body is going to be unconsciously desiring, or even consciously desiring, that good behavior more often. So yeah, just break it down into what is something that you quite enjoy. So from this book, Tribe of Mentors, this lady author, she talked about how she loves this like cafe frappuccino or some sort of coffee drink, but she set a restriction so that excuse me, she's only allowing herself to drink it when she's doing her work. So what she'll do is she'll like take her laptop to a coffee shop and then sip on her cafe latte or whatever as she's doing her work. So if she ever has that desire for, I want a cafe latte, she's got to go to the coffee shop and get her work done. And then she's going to get that cafe latte. And yeah. So yeah, there's many different ways that you can accomplish this, but think about the things that you would like to have happen. So, and especially things that, just like in the case of don't shoot the dog, things that are small enough that they can be, reinforced in the moment. So say it's like a fifth of or a quarter of a starburst or something like that, that something is sweet, that just creates that instant positive, like cocaine. Probably shouldn't use cocaine as a rewarding reinforcer, but I don't know. Something that has a similar effect to cocaine for yourself, or hopefully something that's not detrimental to your long term, though. Find something that you love and only reward yourself with it while you're doing the work that you require. So yeah, that is just in the example from the book Tribe of Mentors. Hey, oh, he's just yawning. Okay. Keep track of your negative behavior. Analyze what you need that had that negative behavior. Oh, okay, sorry. Keep track of your negative behavior. Analyze what need you had that negative behavior was attempting to fulfill. Come up with an alternative. Yeah, this goes back into earlier discussions on the reason we do these bad habits is because there's something within us that's desiring some sort of outcome, some sort of need that we have. And a lot of this also is based off of a recent like 9-hour course that I listened to on YouTube by Marshall Rosenberg called Nonviolent Communication Training. So it is a very, very useful training course. And it talks a lot about how the reason we do things is through some sort of core need that we have. And in order to communicate with people, you have, and with yourself, you need to analyze what it is that a need is. Somebody is attempting to communicate to you, and that could be your body is saying, I had this need, listen to me. And so people are doing that as well. So if you can understand what their need that they have, and then come to a better understanding with each other, and then communicate based off that now shared knowledge, it's quite beneficial. So yeah, that's a great YouTube video that you guys can listen to if you've got 9 hours. Like for myself, I just put most everything at 2x speed, and especially for him, he's got a kind of very soft, slow voice that is kind of hippie-ish. So if that's something that turns you off, I think it's still worthwhile to listen to. Just understand that that's kind of the personality that it's coming from. So keep track of your, yes, okay, and then come up with an alternative. So yeah, that's all my action plans for Goal 5. Do you have anything, Sumit?
No.
Okay, I need to make sure I'm going to listen back on this so that, and I'll share the links in the description to this live stream. Rule 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. So this is probably the only rule that is not actually attainable of his Rule 12s, or at least depending upon your definition of perfect, it's unattainable. Yeah, because I don't know, for myself, I hear perfect, and it's like there's no flaws in it at all. And being human beings, we're an aggregation of flaws that are, and from that, our entire house is a collection of aggregations of flaws that kind of puts character into our surroundings, and it's usually like a mirror representation of the personality that owns that house, so or that lives in that apartment or room, anything like that. So you can't exactly remove all flaws to your house, but you can put them in order. And so, yeah, maybe if you ignore perfect for right now, set your house in order before you criticize the world, because things can be flawed and still be ordered. Just like as I was talking about, articulate your problems. Problems that have been articulated, they're not necessarily solved, but they're understood. So that's the putting in order there. So as long as you have an understanding of where things should be and why things are not at that point at this moment, then you can build up from there. And so, I mean, of course, it's very easy to just, okay, maybe it's not very easy, but it's very simple to clean your room. That's a basic understanding. And it seems ridiculous, of course, because there's so many other problems outside of your room, but to devote that time to actually doing so is beneficial in the long run. Clean your room. So yeah, just like we were talking about earlier, it's actually advice that Peterson talks about in his lectures for training children. I think really, gosh, I really need to read Jean Piaget's books, because being the kind of man-child that I am, I don't even think I'm worthy of having that precursor to that. I'm still very much mentally a child. Understanding exactly what I can do to utilize my childlike behavior towards something that is useful for myself, that would be quite useful. So yeah, he talks about teaching a kid to clean their room is to give them micro routines. And so, can you pick up this toy? Yes. Okay, great. Now put it in the chest. Okay, great. Good job. Reward yourself. And if you don't want to, just make sure it's some sort of small reward that you can positively impact yourself. What was that? The positive reinforcement. Yes. Very, very good book, by the way, the Karen Pryor book. A shelf. Okay, so yeah, in order to clean your room, you're not going to clean your entire room in a day or however much time you have. You've got only an hour or 20 minutes. Don't attempt to clean your entire room in that amount of time. You're going to fail. So depending upon how much time you have, look at what aspect of your room you can accomplish within that short amount of time. So this shelf here is incredibly disorganized. I've got 20 minutes. I can do that. I can take out all these books, organize them, put them back into place, throw away anything that is messy in that small segment, that small section. And then next time you've got 60 minutes. Okay, I can clean my closet now. I can go through, organize everything, make it in order. So yeah, even if you're not cleaning your entire room, because your room is not just your room, there's also the outer parts of your room, like the bathroom, the kitchen, your house, and then from there the garage, your yard. These are all outward, like an ever expanding bubble of your room. So start with the smallest thing that you can, and then once that's done, increase the bubble a little bit. Sorry, Sumit, you were going to say something?
Oh no, when you said you are a child, I said welcome to the club.
Yeah. I think this might be an actual quote from the book. Are there things that you could do, that you know you could do, that would make things around you better? So yeah, this kind of goes into something that I had been attempting to at least do, of keeping a log, basically, of any problems that I see around me. And this is a very easy thing to do, because just writing a log doesn't require any effort at all. It's moving your hand across a piece of paper. Just by knowing that writing down the problem doesn't mean that you're going to be able to solve it, but at least you know what the problem is. And maybe from there, when you have the time or you have the amount of effort within yourself, you can break down that problem into something that you can do. So this is a piece of advice that I have, I guess, is to articulate your problems. That's keep a list of things that you see around you that could be better. And this doesn't mean that you have to do this right now, making it better, just so that you know this is a problem that I have that could be better. And these can be things that within your own self as a person, things in the physical environment around you, things within the social interactions that you have with people. These are like anything to be labeled as a problem. Just make sure that it's something that you witness with your own eyes. Because maybe what you perceive to be a problem is something that is, I don't know, something more useful for somebody else. So first, deal with your own problems. And articulate them and write them down. Only think about the aspects that you can accomplish right there in the moment, or set aside time and strategize for longer term needs / problems. So you have these problems written down. Say you have 20 minutes or an hour. Which of these problems could you potentially accomplish within that 1 hour? If it's none of them, then pick one of those problems, maybe the most important one that you have in that moment, because that usually means that you're able to put the most amount of effort into it, or it's the thing that's most on your mind. That's probably the largest problem that you have within your own psyche at this moment. Say you only have 20 minutes or an hour. Create a micro, understand a fraction of what that problem is. So cut it down into 1/10. What is 1/10? What would be 1/10 of dealing with that problem? Maybe go about dealing with that. Okay. Yeah. So this goes back into the earlier things of not having goals, but having strategies. So every problem is kind of like a goal, or yeah, it's basically the implicit goal is solve this. So break that down into the micro routines to that. And of course, I'm just like spouting things off as if it's that easy, but it's not. Expect that it's not going to be easy. Okay, here's something that is quite useful. If a problem is reoccurring, look to see what the source is and then deal with that. This is also something I got from the Marshall Rosenberg 9-hour training course. He has this great analogy of you're walking along in the woods and there's a river, and oh my gosh, there's a baby floating in the river. You go out, grab that baby, bring it to safety. And then you look out again, and there's another baby. You swim out there, grab that baby, bring it out to safety. And then you see there's two babies now floating in the river. And so you call somebody nearby that you see. Both of you go out, grab that baby, grab those babies, and bring them out to the river. And then you look back into the river. There's 4 babies coming out. At some point, you have to work your way upstream to see what is causing all these babies to fall into the river. And so it's a silly example, but it's very useful if you have a certain problem that is constantly coming up, and you can oh, I solved this. I dealt with it. This problem is no longer there. And then it comes back. You have to deal with it again. If you can work your way upstream to know, okay, my floor is dirty again. I can clean it, but I know that every time I do that, it becomes dirty again. What is causing my floor to become dirty? Oh, somebody's walking in my house with muddy shoes on. Okay, I need to deal with that problem. People walk in my house with muddy shoes on. How do I deal with that problem? And then, I don't know, work your way out from there. Yeah, so that's all of my sets of
That is
strategies for Rule 6.
that is it did not come up yesterday, or was I sleeping when it did?
Yeah, I
It
think
is.
that this was after you went to bed.
Oh man, this is such a great point. So I think again, most of the things we are dealing with, we've been dealing with them like our whole lives, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and they're still not fixed.
Mm-hmm.
So we are. I think at least I'm just trying to take the babies out of the water and say, "Oh, I saved a baby." Or when I don't save it, I'm like, "Oh, I didn't save it." That is so sad.
Mm.
But it's to actually go to the source of the babies that I don't know how I'll do that with the problems, but at least now I know that there is such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you always got to keep in mind there's this serenity prayer from Alcoholics Anonymous, which is like, Lord, give me the courage to change the things that I can, the wisdom to know the things that I cannot. No, shoot. It's something to the effect of know what you can change, know what you can't change, and then know the difference between the two. It's breaking it down, but because I only know this kind of like secondhand. But it is look up the Serenity Prayer. It's a very useful mentality to have for knowing what are things that are outside of my control, and then okay, there's something that is always happening to you. You always have control over your own actions. Even in the cases where it seems like somebody is forcing you to do something, you always have the option to not allow that person to force you to do that. And of course, this is something that this very much is involved with one of the courses in Marshall Rosenberg's 9-hour. Like, I know all of these things are like aggregates from mostly things not actually in the book, and that's probably could be taken as a fault for Peterson as an author, because he expresses these rules and he doesn't. Most of the chapter is not actually related, or it's related in a more abstract way. So it requires a lot more individual interpretation in order to turn it into actual life strategies. So yeah, I was talking about in the Marshall Rosenberg 9-hour course. Gosh, dang it, what was I even talking about?
You're talking about how rather than try to solve the symptoms of the problem, you should go to the source of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that lecture, or it's not even a lecture. It's like a training course that was probably from like cassette tapes back in the 70s or so. It talks about finding the needs that people are trying to communicate to you, and why problems arise, and things like that. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but that's all right. If you want, please feel free to listen to that. It's on YouTube. It's a 9-hour thing. Just when you have an hour at a time, just listen to it at 2x speed, and very useful in your interpretation of Peterson's book, or at least the utilization of Peterson's rules. If a problem is recurring, look to see what the source is and deal with that. Yeah. So that concludes my strategies, I guess, for Rule 7 or Rule 6. Sorry. Rule 7: pursue what is meaningful and not what is expedient. This is probably Peterson's most abstract rule, and so, I mean, it becomes less abstract when you listen to, especially probably his maps of meaning courses, because he kind of breaks down what it is that meaning, that sense of meaning that we have is from, which is like that. Excuse me, the taming of the chaos surrounding us, that taming of things that were originally outside of our control and now within our own control. Okay, that reminds me of back what I was trying to bring up earlier from Marshall Rosenberg's lecture. He was not lecture. He was talking about how even in cases where it seems as though people are forcing you to do something, you always have some sort of option to rebel against those forces. But you also have by utilizing those options, you're going to be faced with consequences, of course. But, sorry. Even in the cases of, say, Nazi Germany, he brings up this really interesting example about Adolf Eichmann, who is, I guess, kind of like a desk jockey war criminal. I'm not really sure, just because I haven't read Eichmann in Jerusalem, but he talks kind of a little bit about that, and Peterson's also talked about that. I guess the subtitle of the book is The Banality of Evil. And the reasoning that the officials in Nazi Germany were able to commit the atrocities that they had, Eichmann says it was easy for them to do so because they had created a system of language for themselves that took all of their individual agency out of the picture. So when they prior to them doing something, they would have the rationalization of, you have to do this. It's outside of your control. You must do this. You can't do otherwise. Creating that mentality of, I want to say, lack of free will, or at least lack of will, if you want to go that route, of not being in control over your own actions, because all these external elements are at work that are intended to force you to commit these atrocities. And if you want to scale it back so that it's not in Nazi Germany, but more in your own day-to-day life, say the place of business that you work at, or school that you're at, or something like that, they have a silly rule, or a rule that you don't want to follow, maybe like a dress code or something like that. You have that option to rebel against that. And you always have to keep in mind what consequences are going to arise from that, so that you can deal with those consequences when they arise. And you can weigh the options between the two. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say on that, I guess. Rule 7. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient, right? Okay, so here was a action plan oriented towards that. Whenever you're faced with a need, come up with two options that will fulfill that need, and then choose the wiser of the two. So I actually have, I guess, a personal related story to that. Or it's not even a story, just a strategy. So after work or during lunch, there's the option to go to a fast food restaurant, or there's the option to eat something healthier. So just by putting that mentality of having two positions that you can go towards, you're hungry, so that's your need in that situation, and there's two strategies that you can utilize in order to fulfill that need. So once you have those two positions in your head of, I need to eat, now I can choose between these two, you can pursue what is more meaningful by going towards the one that you know is healthier for you in the long run. And of course, it's much harder done than said, but I think by having that mentality, at least for myself, whenever I've done that, where like I'm super hungry, I want to eat junk food, but when I put that in my head, okay, I have two options. Do I go to Taco Bell, or do I go to this other restaurant, say like Chipotle, which is, I mean, they're both technically fast food, but maybe it's a kind of silly analysis to say that Chipotle is healthier fast food. But anyway, within your own mind, you know that it's the better option of the two. And so whenever you're setting yourself up between two options, and you know which one is the better option of the two, go towards that better option. And you're still going to satisfy that need of being fulfilled, of being your hunger satiated. But I think you can do that with any need that you have, potentially. I don't know. This is just one example, so you'll have to do your own legwork in order to figure out what the better option of the two is for whatever need that you're facing at the time. Okay. This is something also partially from Rosenberg's courses. If two following. If two needs conflict with each other, show empathy for the opposing need, come up with a compromise that will satisfy both of them. In parentheses, I have, it may require the delay of one of them for a certain amount of time. So this was in the course. This is probably a bit flawed to label this as 12 rules for life, since most of my examples are coming from external sources, but they're related to the rules, so deal with it. In Rosenberg's example, it was between a married couple. So one of them had the need of affection, and the other had the need of reading something that they were quite interested in, or they were working at a specific time. So there's a win-lose situation where one of them continues on with their need, say, of reading or of working, and the other one does not gain their need. So they get mad and say that you're putting your work above me, your wife, or your partner, whatever. One second. So you need to empathize with the opposing need, say that affection, articulate it so that they understand that you understand what their need is, and maybe they themselves don't even realize what their need is. And so empathize with it and come up with a strategy for how both of those can be fulfilled. Maybe that person has a need for their room to be cleaned and they're too busy with other things, and so they ask you to do it, and you're busy with some other thing. And so you show that you comprehend that they have the need, and you set up a strategy for how that can happen. Okay, I'm really busy right now. Can you give me 20 minutes, and then I can help you with that? And then maybe that works. Maybe there's other things at play. So you need to articulate between each other to know which need is. All the needs are important, but you need to know what order they need to go in, or they can go in. And so putting that more into the individual perspective, your consciousness or your psyche is a collection of needs that are all screaming to be fulfilled. So it's kind of like in the Pixar movie Inside Out, where there's the 5 personalities within you that are seeking to gain control. And so you, as the ego or the self, you have to choose which player you're going to be putting in the control position at what point in time. But you can't, as we talked about earlier, be a tyrant against those other needs and desires that you have. And so you need to maybe better articulate what needs you yourself are feeling. So like in the cases of you have a bad habit, maybe the best solution to that is to understand what's the base thing below that, say a desire for excitement or for something new or something exhilarating, and find a better pathway for that. That might actually satisfy another need for part of your personality, say a desire to live a longer, more beneficial life. That's sorry. So yeah, find a compromise that will satisfy both of them, and it may require the delay of one of them or a compromise in the way that is most fulfilling for both needs. If you have a need that is not one that you want to satisfy, seek the underlying need behind it. Perhaps it's a needed sense of reward, gratify the underlying need. That's facade you want to avoid. So I use facade, but it's not the best choice of words, but I can't think of anything better. So your mind will tell you that there's only one way to get this need that you have. And that's obviously a lie, because there's always at least 2 options: the better option and the worse option. The more the present option and the future option. That the options that overvalue the present and those that overvalue the future. And of course, your present or your physical present needs need to be fulfilled, but they can be done so in a way that also aid the future needs. So try to come up with 2 choices and then choose between the better of the 2. But I know it's much easier said than done, and it needs effort to accomplish, but at least it's something. So maybe even if it's the best of 2 bad options, then choose the least bad. And then maybe over time you can continue doing that so that you come up with a new, slightly better option of the 2 bad options and choose that slightly better. And then maybe you work your way out of a pit of hell. I mean, that's articulated in the story of Lot when he's in Sodom, or is he in Sodom, or he's in Gomorrah, when the people are banging at his door and they desire to have the strangers within his house. And of course, in that culture, the stranger is the highest value that they hold, because stranger is somebody that brings you things that you hadn't had previous to that. And so when Lot was in this horrible situation between of Gomorrah, which is, you read about some of the things that they did in Gomorrah, it's astounding, whether fictional or otherwise. You understand that Gomorrah is not a place that you would want to live in. So Lot was faced with 2 bad choices, and he had to resort to offering the slightly less bad in that culture, which is the giving up of his daughters, which from a modern understanding is like quite quite hard to reckon with, because we have we highly value our children, and especially women, much more so than they did back then.
It's actually not.
Hmm?
I mean, it's not that surprising. Remember about the religion of peace. So,
Oh yeah,
there are like stories all over the place, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
So for that culture, especially, Lot would have had a higher desire to protect the stranger within his house, which is commendable for sure. And because he had that higher value, that put him in a position by being in Gomorrah to choose the lesser of two evils. Which it's still evil to give up your daughter to the crowd to be raped, which didn't actually happen, but in the case of Lot, because God intervened, thankfully. But there's other cases, like in the story of, or in the book of Judges, a very similar thing where a man gives up the prostitute or the slave woman that he had to the people of an evil city, and they raped and killed her. And it's the Bible is no picnic to have to read through. that's for sure. But it's a constant collection of these situations of people having to choose between two evil situations. It's rough. Okay. If two need,
I remember
what are
the
you howling
story.
about?
I
Sorry.
remember the story, but they were not actually raped and killed, right?
In the case of Lot, yes. The angels, as it turns out in the story, or the strangers, they blinded the men that were banging on the door. But in the case of Judges, there was this. Sorry, one second. Come here. Come here. In a case in Judges, there was a Levite priest that had a harlot that it wasn't in Gomorrah, but it was some other. I think it was like some Benjamite city, where there were people banging on his door, and he, for fear of his own life, gave up his slave woman that he had, and they raped and beat her and killed her. And that Levite priest then kind of used that example to let everyone in the surrounding cities know just how evil how evil that city had become. And so it's, yeah, the Bible is no picnic to have to go through and try to rationalize, but life also is no picnic to have to rationalize between. Of course, it would be quite nice to live in a perfect utopia where these types of things don't ever happen, but alas, not the case.
Actually, people who say, "Oh, this is so barbaric," actually don't fully appreciate the reality we live in.
Yeah. I mean, that's funny how most people's proof for the most people use the evil that occurs in the world as a proof against the existence of God, and it's probably the best proof there is. But I think it's funny how they also use the Bible to show how evil the people, the children of Israel, and how evil God is in his commands to the children of Israel. Because, I don't know, side discussion that's not really involved with this at all, but it's, yeah. Okay. How to deal with your shadow's needs. He wants to be listened to. Give him at least that. Give him listen to him. That's one of your shadows. What we were talking about earlier. Your the worst version of yourself, which isn't necessarily the shadow, but it's, I guess, the repressed version of yourself is maybe a better understanding of it. He wants to be listened to. Give him at least that. So listen to him and see where he and you can compromise on whatever. And maybe there's cases that you can't compromise because you need to be tyrannical in this situation, but maybe you can compromise by letting him have a little bit of freedom in a separate domain that you're willing to compromise on. And it's very strange to think of yourself as two people, but I mean, you kind of are. Because the person that you are when you're your best self and the person that you are when you're your worst self are essentially two different people. Both of them have no desire to interact with the other. Okay, that's all of them from Rule 7. Do you have anything to add to Rule 7? Pursue what is meaningful and not what is expedient.
Not kind of directly.
How about indirectly?
Like what I'm saying, trying to say is I don't have any solutions on this,
Oh,
man. Sorry, John. But
yeah.
how do you really know like what is meaningful and expedient? And what I mean by that is, I would say meaningful would be me leave everything and go into the woods and make a cabin and do that Walden thing. Okay, that would be meaningful. Now I might say that. I remember how he lays out the difference between career and a job.
Mm-hmm.
So I might say job is expedient because someone else is paying you to do the work and you wouldn't do it if they were not paying you. But if you had a career, like you do it like you're doing it all the time, right? So Peterson uses that.
Mm-hmm.
But like there are these really complicated situations, right, where you have to at times have to do like expedient things so that one day you can do meaningful things. Sometimes there is no way.
Yeah. I think probably a very useful action plan for this specific one is to probably go through the future authoring program just because, or something similar to it. There was this one thing that was pretty similar to the future authoring program, but I think it was actually a little bit better just because it broke down your 5-year goal and then your 1-year goal and then your 1-month goal and then your week goal and then your day goal. It kind of broke down your whole thing into each portion of that into those points. So maybe if I find that, I'll also share that in the description. I don't remember what it was called, so sorry about that. But the future authoring program is useful because it helps you understand where you want to see your life in, say, the next 5 years, or what your ideal life would be. So in order to discern whether something is meaningful or expedient would be to contrast it, no, not contrast it, but to compare it at least to whether or not it is putting you closer towards your ideal life or further away from your ideal life. So you said that like going out into the woods would be meaningful. Perhaps if maybe that's your ideal life, that's what you're working towards, is to be able to live out in the woods with no pressures or anything like that. For myself personally, I had a good understanding of what would be meaningful for me to do, which was to kind of leave my job, go out and into the world, and just kind of live off myself for a while. That was my understanding of what would be meaningful for me, and that ultimately failed quite instantaneously. And that put me at a kind of depressing state where I didn't know what was supposed to be meaningful anymore. But looking back, I can see that actual action of going out was kind of two things. It wasn't exactly related at all to my ideal life. It was kind of a trick that my mind was playing on myself to say that, and a lot of it was based off of Peterson, so he gets a little bit of blame for that, but mine also for not fully understanding him. of seeking out some sort of painful, not painful, but yeah, I guess suffering. Seeking out the largest burden that I could carry, and carrying it. That was my kind of mental state that I was attempting to go towards. But obviously, I couldn't carry it just because it failed within like the first 2 hours, which is, I know, pathetic. But
Would you like to just one thing in one insert here? Would you like to
Mhm.
elaborate on the point of how you were not trying to pursue what you wanted instead of running away from your current
Yeah,
life, and how
yeah,
that is like can confuse people, like maybe I'm doing the same thing, John.
yeah. That's why the second point I wanted to bring up is, upon further analyzation as to why perhaps I failed in my attempt at uh, carrying the the heaviest burden I could carry, was I wasn't no I was unconsciously running away from responsibility from where I was currently. So for me in that moment, it was much easier to not deal with things that I had stacking up in my day-to-day life. So it's easier to not have to go to a job, and just to read books all day. That was my kind of like plan, is to, I had a ever ever growing list of books that I want to read, and I saw that the only way to accomplish that would be to like get rid of all responsibilities, and just focus on that. But that getting rid of all responsibilities is, it's weak, or it's cowardly. So yeah, that was me, still is me, I guess. And so, in order to discern between meaningfulness and expedient, see if
John, I'm not sure I
you're,
completely agree with you there.
what, that running away from responsibilities is cowardly.
I'm not sure if I disagree with that. I shouldn't have used the word disagree. There you go. So we are. You see, here is how you have the opposite thought the very next second. If you were to
Yeah,
try.
I was wondering
So
if just by restating myself, I could get you.
so uh, I have the same issue. The ever growing list of books I want to read, and I was like, John, I wish so much that I could just suspend everything, go away for 10 years, like read all that shit, and then come back. You know,
Hmm.
so that would be great. But that's not how life works. The time does not stop, and you cannot just go somewhere and then come back and resume your life. Your life will if you go to the woods, your life would not be like by wood. I kind of mean a quiet place, where I can just read
Hmm.
and read.
Yeah.
Uh, so then you would be, like giving up on other things in life and everything. That's fine. But if you maybe again, like maybe it's a good thing to suspend. Okay, here is why I was disagreeing with you.
Mhm.
Remember how that there is some Democrat lady in US, Nancy, her name is, and long time back, some talk show host was criticizing her for saying that they want the kind of utopia where people have their basic needs fulfilled, and they can then focus on creating art, innovation, this and that, like really
Mhm.
getting going at things, right?
Mhm.
uh, so these people have this notion that, remember that guy who created jet engine, like I hear like he went through a lot of pain for
Mhm.
that. So like they think that like they would be creating, like that guy, some equivalent of jet engine or something, when you satisfy their basic needs. And back then I kind of uh, didn't see it that way, but now I'm seeing maybe that's the actual utopia, John. Don't you think? Like a world where all these responsibilities have been kind of taken away, like we have become so advanced, and you can just focus on doing things that you actually want to do. Uh,
I mean, yeah. That's. I mean, being honest with myself, that's probably my personal idea of a utopia is where technology has gotten to a point where all of the expedient jobs have been replaced with unconscious uh, robots or however it can be accomplished, and that gives individuals the freedom to attempt whatever it is that they're seeking to accomplish. But that's at least not the world we live in currently. And maybe if that's our ideal, we can work towards fulfilling that. But it could be that that's not the ideal for everyone. Because like I've worked with blue collar people, and that idea is not scary, but it's not definitely not the ideal that they're aiming towards. That's not what they want. Because some people like their job is their freedom because it gets them away from I don't know whatever it is that is hell in their family life, and maybe their job is where they feel most fulfilled. So just because it may be my own and yours and other people who are high in openness, that's kind of the ideal world that we should be striving for. That doesn't mean that, that's going to be the world for everyone, because those other people could be actively fighting against that, and in certain cases, I think they do. It's kind of funny, like in certain cases that human workers will attempt to sabotage automated um, functionings so that their jobs are able to be kept. It's funny.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I can see what you're saying. Um,
Okay. So yeah, that's pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And so that's going to be varied between individuals, because some people, like I myself, see certain jobs that I've worked as being a expedient, uh, not lasting solution to problems. But other people are very fulfilled by the jobs that they have, because that's what meaning is. I think is to be solving some sort of problem. That's what people are fulfilled by. That's where they get their sense of meaning, is to be there's some sort of like hole in society, and if you can place yourself in that hole, and so that society functions better than it had previously, then that's super meaningful for you. And people get that in their jobs, or they get that in their relationships, like in their family, or they get that in religion by being a part of something much larger than themselves. And yeah, there's a lot of different ways that people get that sense of meaning. So it could be different for each individual.
I have got a thing to add on that.
Mm-hmm.
There is this American comedian, you must be knowing about it. His name is Bill Maher. So
Mm-hmm.
he had this really funny video where he first pointed out some kind of stat that like somewhere like 80% of workers felt disengaged at work or something like that. So he was making fun of all these posters that these corporate companies have, the motivational ones. So the
Mm-hmm.
point he was making was like reality is not in sync with those posters. So posters are always saying some kind of like enlightened things. So he created a series of like posters which were more in sync with reality. So and Like one of them was a guy standing on some kind of cliff, and it reads, "You said you would kill yourself if you ever turned into your parents." Uh, and then it says, "Well, now," and then question mark. And one of the poster was, which is relates to our point, which was, uh, and I can certainly relate to the suicide one, because I am becoming like my parents. So, and
Mhm.
as a child, I felt that I will never turn into these losers. I mean, uh, I had very enlightened plans. So, uh, um, yeah. So that poster was uh, something like. Think like, what else could you be doing right now? Like, you could be home with your family right now. So, and the point there is that, yes, you might find some degree of meaning in your current job or current situation, but it's like fear of missing out. So there is always like some kind of higher meaning that you can derive, like when for example, I used to really like my job, and
Mhm.
I can now again make myself like it. But I was exposed to some ideas, right?
Mhm.
So, which I found so profound that I was like, oh man, like there is so much to do. There are so many books to read, and I mean, there is so much really meaning out there. And what I'm doing, I'm just writing code, and so even if I do find meaning, right, and I can inculcate that meaning in my current situation, but then I feel like I'm kind of deceiving myself, because there is always this like, hey, but wait a minute, there is a larger meaning, if you did this, if you did that, if you pursued this, pursued that. So that thing really screws you up, man.
Yeah, I had a similar like feeling when I was a cashier for a while. I just the job is so monotonous, monotonous that it's very easy to see how my job could very much be replaced by like a touchscreen. You people choose what option they want. They put in their card and then they leave. Then I realized that had I I took it the time to imagine what would happen if that touchscreen was like put into place. But a lot of my job, when it's not that uh, monotonous, sorry, when it's not that collection of scripted behavior for myself and for interactions with people, my a lot of my job is also when something goes wrong. So if there's some sort of problem that happens within that scripted behavior, my job is to deal with that. And if it was just a touch screen, as soon as something goes out of sync, then that would be an ever escalating series of unfortunate events that could not be satisfied by that still having that touchscreen. So it was at least useful for me in knowing that the reason that we're there at the job is not necessarily for when things are going right, but we're there in order to keep things from going wrong, because things can go wrong very easily and do go wrong very easily. And we're kind of that that one barrier between things going horribly wrong and like shutting down for the entire day because something bad happened and it wasn't able to fix itself. And then being that one person that, or at least one segment that is able to keep that from happening. So that at least helped me in surviving my job. So think about how, if you weren't there at your job, whenever a problem arises, that problem would just get worse and worse and worse, or it would put everything at a standstill. Yeah.
Even at that, like, I might add, remember how Peterson was saying that you can greet people properly, right? And smile at the cashier counter, and or you could just be really bitter and be this thing,
Yeah,
have that face, so then you make other people miserable also, right?
yeah,
So
that's another thing. You can be that small window of light within a person's day, and it's hard to. I mean, I definitely can see how that's happened to me. Not when I was in that position, because I'm too introverted and too lazy, I guess, to attempt to fix that. But in certain cases, like there's certain cashiers that I've uh, not worked with, but
okay,
have encountered that have just brightened my day just because of how chipper they were. And those are the types of people that I would want to be in those positions more so than myself. But of course, I still have a lot of myself to work on.
uh, my I new point comes to my mind, which is on bit of a tangent. So you so-called introverts, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are not an introvert in this group, at least. It's really interesting how you people become introverts when you venture outside the group.
Well, I mean, this is kind of a platform for introverts to be able to be extroverted within. There was something I was listening to that was kind of an analyzation of Jung's uh, differences between an introvert and an extrovert. An extrovert is somebody that, when they're out in the world, they're more open to interactions between these things that are uh, physical. So, like with people, usually able to go around with these people and really benefit from. And an introvert is somebody that, like, say you were to take an introvert that was very secluded in that scenario and that extrovert that was benefiting from that. Put both of those people in, say, a library. And now the introvert is quite captivated by all of these separate books and other things around him, because these are all like new things that he can go through that are more acclimated towards his personality, which is to be very by himself. While the extrovert is kind of secluded in that scenario. So it's like an extrovert, depending on the environment, will become an introvert because there's things that don't suit him or her or whatever. So yeah, this platform itself of being online and like not having to worry about physical interactions, it's the my bread and butter in a kind of way, because I don't have to deal with anybody else. I can just be sitting here by myself, a couple of animals around me being loud, and yeah, just talk and not have to worry about, oh, am I doing anything that could be perceived as, I don't know, wrong, just because of not having the proper behavioral insights into human interactions. Like my human interaction game is quite weak, I would say, but this is something that I can uh, thrive within.
You're exactly right, because when I'm in social situations here, I become totally like I don't know what the f I'm supposed to do, uh, right? And but then there are certain friends I have with whom I can discuss ideas and I can discuss it for hours, and like whenever they are like being told that Sumit guy is such a introvert, they're like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting how like these situations can turn just like the switch, because I happen to remember whenever I was speaking about something I cared about, right? So it would not have mattered if I was in front of 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, or 20,000. I still would say what I was going to say. Now my legs might be shaking, right, because of all that, uh, like the fear thing. But I still would
Hmm.
be saying what I was saying. And now, as opposed to like, if it was not something I cared about, uh, uh, like these normal interactions people have,
Hmm.
then even in a safe environment, I would kind of freeze. Uh, so yeah, that has been a really interesting thing that I have observed.
Yeah, and I think especially within the Peterson community, just based off of the different types of people that we interact with in the group, it's very much in the introverted crowd between like uh, technological or coding engineers or people that have been within the gaming community. These are all like it's probably a lot to do with the platform because YouTube is well, I don't know. Uh, uh, like for myself, I came in via I guess Milo, which I came in via Gamergate, which I came in via the gaming community, and so probably for the people, the other introverted people, like the people that are engineers, they're maybe came in via James Damore or something related to that might have happened earlier. These are yeah,
I came
I
via
don't know.
Trump, by the way. I,
Huh?
I came via Trump.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
your current president, he brought me here.
Yeah.
So yeah, the that other point I was making was that yes, you can do that. Just like Peterson said, you can look at that job of a cashier as something that can provide meaning and everything, John. Right?
Hmm.
Like, if you are to do that job, I would say, okay, that's the right way to do it. So far, so good. But here is the thing: that person, you remember that Alexander, that Gulag Archipelago guy.
Hmm.
So he was getting arrested, and he was like wanting to he was like it was really strange, these millions and millions of people are getting arrested and disappearing, and these people are not protesting, like they are not whenever the police comes to arrest them, they just kind of cooperate. No one really what I'm saying is, they don't go down fighting, they don't complain. So what the hell? So he said he didn't do that because if he did like raise hell, maybe 200 people would know, but he wanted the 200 million people to know about what was going on.
Hmm.
And it was wow. I mean, he says in the beginning of the part one, right? So it was wow. I mean, John. So he said he wouldn't
Yeah.
protest. Like, so, I mean, I did not look at that statement as kind of an arrogant statement, John. But still, how he was able to say, okay, one day 200 million people would hear me. That so, how does that relate to your situation? So, yes, I mean, you can derive, let's just say, a lot of meaning out of that job, but maybe you should be uh, like, how do I say this? But your ultimate pursuit should be, for example, to write a script that will be kind of watched by maybe 100 million people.
Hmm.
So maybe you understand what I'm saying. Like, the meaning can get hijacked. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I think this actually probably fits well into Rule 8, which is tell the truth or at least don't lie. Um, so you can tell yourself what is meaningful. No, wait, no. Okay, so we brought up a potential like contradiction within these two rules in a specific situation. So say you were in Nazi Germany and you were hiding a Jew in your closet, and KGB or whoever comes to your door and asks, "Are you hiding any Jews in your house?"
Hey, just to
Now
correct
you,
you, it will
uh
not be KGB.
yeah. Sorry, but it could be useful also in I don't know any of those situations. Um, and so you can resort to the easiest answer, which is to say yes, which is the truth. Yes, I do have a Jew in here, and maybe you'll be rewarded by that. So that's the expedient answer, but it's also the truth. There are different types of truth. There are the expedient truths and the meaningful truths, the ones that are rewarding within the short term and rewarding within the long term. So say you do tell the truth in that instance, and that negatively affects you into the future. Just like in Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov, by doing what he, by committing those actions, he was physically tortured by himself, by his own body, by what he did. So there's certain cases where we use truth to rationalize the expedient manner or the expedient strategies. So in that situation, how would we reconcile both of those rules? Because that's kind of the core outlook that Ben was wanting to look at is, could you use all of these rules and still be a Nazi informer or officer or something like that? And I think these two could very easily be seen as contradictory to each other. So tell the truth, or at least don't lie. It's I would like to say that the do what is meaningful, not what is expedient, would take precedent over Rule 8. But in order to do what is meaningful, it would include Rule 8 insofar as it is capable of. So Benjamin brought up the point of hosting a discussion between you and that guard that is seeking to get the Jews out of your house. And you know, all of these extreme examples are too far outside of our actual personal understanding, and at least for myself, and being capable of really, like, it's very easy to say, oh, here's what I would do in that situation, or here's what I would like to have done in those situations. But it's
You should get a job in the private sector someday.
there's always this options to lie in order to get a short-term reward, as opposed to dealing with the more difficult situation where of actually telling the truth. And that's the thing. People don't like to hear problems, like higher up than you. They don't like to hear problems. They like to hear something's running well. So when you're in those situations where your options are either to lie, say that there's no problems, and then, oh, you get rewarded, or it gets pushed down the line to somebody else's problem, or you come to them and say, hey, we've got a problem, and then you get people get mad at you. There's a third option in that scenario where there's a problem and you have an idea for a solution, and you have a good understanding of that problem so that you know that this solution could be viable in dealing with that. So if you go to the person higher up than you with a problem, they're going to get mad. But if you come to a person higher up than you, and you come to them with a problem and a potential solution, they're going to be happy because that's now something that they didn't know about that can be potentially fixed. And maybe you become now somebody that they can go to whenever there are these types of problems, and you become the problem fixer guy, or something like it. When those types of problems come in, then you become, I don't know, somebody that's used to that. So there's the, I guess, third option between lying or telling the truth, or going for what is expedient and what is meaningful. It's going for the more difficult, so, and thus, not thus, because there's things that are difficult that are still expedient. The difficult, meaningful truth, as opposed to the expedient truth or the lie that is meaningful, because a difficult truth that is meaningful is more meaningful than a lie that aids towards your long-term goals. Because if that lie is found out, then that's detrimental towards your long-term goals. So it's less meaningful because what you find meaning is in your long-term goals. Okay, so what are my strategies for Rule 8? Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Practice saying smaller controversial statements that you believe, with the caveat that you yourself may be mistaken and are willing to hear an opposing argument that deals with your insights. So, again, all these things are much easier said than done, but at least there's that potential to be done, some sort of strategy to get something done, even if it fails. So saying something, I think really that's how disagreements can be at least made better, is by coming at it, and it is brought up in, I think Rule 8, how him and his wife, they would have a disagreement, both of them separate once they realize they're not getting anywhere, think about what they themselves as an individual did that contributed to the problem that they're facing, and then come back after they both have done that, stated how they've contributed to the problem, and maybe what can now be done from that, or now that they have that enforced, self-imposed humbleness upon the problem, they can be able to listen to each other a little bit better, because both of them have put themselves down to a point that they both realize how fallible they are, and the goal is to be less of that fallible person and be more confident, or not confident, but more competent in the problem into the future. So I guess my advice, the piece of advice I have here is saying smaller controversial statements that you believe, with the caveat that you yourself, so caveat in the case of like, prior to saying these controversial statements, or things that you think you believe but you're not entirely sure of, that, or something that you're afraid of saying, prior to doing that, putting forth the statement that you may be wrong in this situation, and you're willing to have your mind changed. So yeah, just so that the other person knows that you aren't coming at from a place of I don't know, control or superiority, but you're not coming to denigrate this other person by saying, hey, you're wrong in this situation and I'm right. You're coming in a place of, I'm usually wrong about things, I may be wrong about this specific thing, but from my perspective, perhaps my wrong perspective, this does not look to be the best solution, or this doesn't look to be the the most viable strategy towards our long-term goals. And that can be in relationships, in work, or I don't know, other avenues. Yeah, in just like debates with other people, having some sort of goal that you to share, maybe well-being, being if you want to go that far down, maybe it's the long-standing nature of a company, whatever. So it's funny. I think when I was writing this, I was thinking about how that's kind of what this group is for me. It is our like Saturday discussions are a collection of all of us kind of putting forth statements that we're not sure if we believe or not, but we're kind of leaning more towards this is what I perceive to be true, and then we discuss it. And this is kind of at least for, this is kind of a place where we're able to discuss these things, which is very valuable. And just having that is quite useful. And just in case anybody wants to participate, the links to that are down below. It's not a plug. It's just if you yourself listening to this don't have some sort of outlet for where you can put forth these perhaps controversial ideas or ideas that you believe to be true, but that you know that you can't say publicly because you don't know it from all sides. And of course, us being a Peterson group, we have that aspect of echo chamberness where we tend to agree with each other on quite like anti-left things. So that's probably a problem.
Yeah, I've been saying we need some social justice warriors and liberals here so that Ben doesn't get away with all that stuff.
Yeah, we need some anti-Trumpers to join the group so that Sumit can get mad at them. But having some sort of group that you're able to discuss these things that you're thinking on, it would be useful for mostly for yourself.
John, we are having a bit of a problem here.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Yeah, it's getting really late for me. And somebody has to turn off the podcast after you are done.
Yeah. Well, I can sign in with my other account to turn it off after I'm done. So if you need to head out, you're welcome to it. And as soon as I finish, I can do that.
Have you ever tested it? Because
I've started it before.
No.
1 or 2 times, I think.
That's fine. You have started it, but in this case, I have started it, and I see the stop broadcast button, bro.
Okay. Here's what we can do. You can stop the broadcast. I can start it again on my machine.
But then we will have 2 videos, bro.
That's okay. I'm thinking since this is already 3+ hours long, I think what we should do is to cut out each individual action plan series for each rule as their own videos, and that way we can have a 15 to 20 minute segment for each individual rule. That way people can go from there. So even though this will be split into 2, it's technically already a second part to the 12 rules for life discussion. So it shouldn't be too bad.
Well, that's a good idea.
Okay, so let me, I guess, finish. You want to go to bed now, I guess? Yeah, because I still have quite a few notes to go through.
Okay, so I guess I can click the stop button now, and you can go to that page and create a new event.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll do that.
All right.
Thanks. All right. Be back in a bit. If anybody's listening or watching, or if you're listening to this afterwards, just go to the next video. And as well, just all the links and stuff are down below if you want to participate.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.